Sociedad de Empresas Periodísticas del Perú queremos darle la bienvenida y en primer lugar disculparnos por el retraso. Hemos tenido algunos problemitas técnicos, pero ya están siendo solucionados. Bueno, ustedes saben, la Sociedad de Empresas Periodísticas del Perú agrupa a las principales empresas editoriales del país, EPENSA, La República, El Comercio y la revista Caretas, y estamos llevando a cabo desde el 2012 una serie de acciones y actividades destinadas a fortalecer a la prensa y a darle presencia y relevancia como medio publicitario. En esta oportunidad hemos organizado este evento cuyo objetivo es promover y dar a conocer las principales pautas acerca de lo que es el content marketing y por otro lado, cómo conectan las revistas actualmente con los consumidores en sus diferentes plataformas. En la última etapa de la exposición de las conferencias de hoy vamos a presentar el caso Lipwick por parte de tanto los organizadores como los auspiciadores participantes en dicho evento. Vamos a empezar la presentación de hoy con Gary Garland. Gary es exdirector ejecutivo de servicios de publicidad de Magazines Canada. Él nos va a comentar cómo las revistas se conectan con los consumidores, el buen futuro de la prensa escrita, el uso adecuado de multiplataformas, efectividad publicitaria y cómo dentro de este contexto es que las revistas han adquirido relevancia. Ok, demos un aplauso a Gary y
Buenos dias, good morning. Glad to see you all here today. It's a real pleasure, I have to say, to be here today and talk to you about how magazines connect with consumers. And I have to say that this is my very first time in Lima, in Peru. And so far, it's just been a terrific experience, wonderful people. The food, I'd love to take it all home with me. I know I can't. Even the driving. You know, if there were a World Cup, if there was a World Cup of crazy driving, I'm sure Peru would win. No questions asked. Now, I know you call this winter. I'm Canadian, that's winter. And that's summer in Canada. Well, maybe I'm exaggerating a little bit, but I would take your weather home with me too if I could, believe me. So, my job today is to talk about four things. First of all, just to give you a broad industry perspective as to how magazines perform in the global marketplace. And I'm going to do my best to try and show you some numbers that reflect Latin America, as well as Peru, where I can find data, as well as just Canada, not as a benchmark, but just as a comparison point. From there, I want to talk about magazine media, because magazines aren't just print anymore. They're print plus just about every digital platform and extension you can imagine. So I want to just comment on that. I'll then get into how magazines work. So I'll be talking about key benefits and strengths for both advertisers and for consumers. And then last, creative uses of the medium, primarily the print medium, because there's so many things you can do, and hopefully you'll find it, if not a bit fun, a bit maybe inspirational. So that's my plan. Now, before I go any further, Canadians are well known for always apologizing for something. So I feel obligated that I have to apologize to you for something. The first thing is, I'll be presenting, as you know, in English. And I'm very sorry about that, but if I were speaking in Spanish, you'd be running from the room. Maybe arrested, I don't know. But I'd love to get out of here alive, so I'm going to do my best. And thank goodness we have a very good interpreter in the box back there. The second thing I guess I'll apologize for it. I'm going to throw a lot of information at you today. A lot of charts, a lot of graphs, more than anybody should ever have to endure in the space of about 50 minutes. And so the audience reaction that I typically get is usually something like this. So I'm going to do my best to take you through these charts and graphs. Don't try to pay attention to everything. You can't, it's too much. But the reason why I want to do that is just to show you the depth and the breadth of the kind of information that's available to you in the marketplace. That helps explain how magazines work and how to get the most value out of the magazine medium. So if that sounds good, I'm going to press on. So, magazines. Well, they've been around for a very, very long time, really since the invention of the printing press about 350, 400 years ago. And you can't have survived that long as a medium without doing something very well. And that's something that magazines do very well, is content. Great content that people want to read, that they'll spend their valuable leisure time with, that they'll even spend their hard-earned cash to buy. So content, at the end of the day, is truly king, as people like to say. Content is king. The other thing that you can't forget, in fact, people like you, media directors and advertisers, always reminding me, yeah, it's not just content, though, it's in context. Magazines are very good at creating editorial contexts that are very focused and that people want to spend time with. And so when it comes to context of magazines, it spans so many things. It can be magazines about fashion or food. Maybe it's sports. Canada didn't make it to the World Cup either, so no worries. Home decoration, home decor, or celebrities and fashion. World or local, regional politics, news, even business. So there's so many, in Canada there are about 147 different editorial genres that magazines fall into, and so there's a lot of targeting ability there. So at the end of the day, consistent content in a context is really what magazines are about, and a true benefit to both advertisers and the consumers alike. Now, magazines, pretty much forever, has always been defined as being print, right? Well, that's no longer the case, because magazine publishers don't call themselves magazine publishers anymore. They call them magazine media companies. And that's because they create content for print as well as for web and e-readers, tablets, mobile, video, social. And God knows what's going to come next as this digital revolution continues to unfold. But I think the point I want to make here is that this is not print versus digital. It's very much print plus digital, and that's how magazine publishers, magazine media companies are viewing themselves more and more. They create content that was traditionally always on print, and now that content is spanning all the various platforms and devices that are relevant to consumers. And so more than ever, branding of magazines is incredibly important. And that brand then creates this wonderful content, which it then uses really to put out on the various devices. So the magazine now is the brand, and if it's a tablet edition or a print edition or a smartphone edition, that's really just a delivery mechanism at the end of the day. It's really that delivery platform that the consumer chooses to read that content on. So, definitions and thinking is beginning to shift. And what we're seeing in Canada, and certainly in other places of the world, you're probably seeing the same thing here, is that digital access to content is now expected by consumers. It wasn't always that way. It used to be nice to do. Now I think it's very much you need to do it. You need to give the consumers choice. And so consumers, let's try this again. Publishers, there we go. Publishers are responding in very different ways. I won't go through this whole chart, but if you take a look at the various digital media touch points, websites, Facebook pages, Twitter posts, online videos, RSS feeds, QR codes, apps for Apple, Android devices, and it goes on and on and on in terms of different ways that publishers are now getting content in front of people. Even from an editorial focus, which used to be so narrow channeled to print, is now all about e-newsletters, content emails, blogs, webcasts, webinars, archive content, polls, surveys, podcasts, photo galleries. The list goes on. So suddenly there are all these new digital touch points that are accompanying print. So you have all these extensions all working together and all providing value to the reader, to your audience. Now, what I find absolutely fascinating, and I'm sure this will be a case study in years to come, and maybe it already is, but as digital media options fragment and grow, print remains highly relevant to readers out there. Print has not gone away, and nor will it. So let me just give you some perspective as to what we're seeing in different parts of the world. If we look at print magazine circulation revenue growth, for example, over the past 5 years, globally, you can see it's about 7% annual growth. That's a pretty good number. Now, North America and Europe, big, mature magazine markets, they're not seeing that same growth. But look at Latin America. I'll tell you, there's not a Canadian publisher that doesn't salivate every time they see that number. They would kill to have those kind of growth numbers. So that's awesome. If you were to take all the magazines that are being printed today, about 22 billion copies are circulated annually, 22 billion. That would equal, if you stack them all up, to, you could stack them from the Earth to the Moon about 16 times, or 8 round trips. That's a lot of magazines. So clearly magazines are a big business and remain so. Even in Canada, I find it quite interesting because in Canada we have about 2,200 magazines being published each year. And what we found was that 59% of all Canadian magazines being published today were launched after the introduction of the internet. So for all those people who said that digital, the internet was going to kill magazines, well, it hasn't happened. In fact, magazines have flourished more during that time than they ever had before. If we look at ad expenditure growth around the world, you can see over on the right side, globally, about 47% during that time frame of 2004 projected out to 2016. These aren't my projections, you'll be glad to know. These are from Zenithop Media. Globally, about 47% growth over that time frame. Latin America, 260. Look at Peru, 313. And of course, that really gets noticed by the big global marketers. And if you take a look at some of the large marketers that are using magazines in a big way around the world, they're truly highly sophisticated, who look at the right metrics, who look for the ROI. And so clearly, whether you're automotive, cosmetics, packaged goods, in the computer or device business, fast food, doesn't matter. The big global players are there, which really says they do their homework and they know it works. And if you look at top advertiser categories, this is my best attempt at trying to compare Peru with Canada. You'll see a lot of crossover in terms of, it's the same categories being advertised in magazines. But I think it's fair to say that in Canada, what we see there is that there are very few, if any, advertiser categories that don't advertise in magazines. So, I think there's a lot of upside in this country in terms of how magazines will develop. Now, digital platforms and devices, as we've really already said, enable content distribution in lots of different ways. Now, through this whole digital transition, what's still interesting is that print still remains the delivery mechanism, if I can use that word, the platform of choice. 71%. 9% only using digital exclusively, with another 19% who use both. So about 90% are still reading print. So that's a pretty good indication that print still has an incredibly big role. And the reasons why, kind of ironically, given mobiles out there, they consider print magazines to be more portable. They love that tactile aspect, the fact that you hold it, you smell it, you feel it, all of those things. Easier to read and browse through. Even, I think, those people who spend their days in front of a computer at work, they're very glad to get away from that when they have their own leisure time. It's me time, my time, and I think that time with a magazine is just something kind of special for them. They don't want to be reading stuff on a device again. Now, not everybody's like that, but we see an element of that. So what we're seeing in Canada is that it takes a lot of time to get people shifted from print to digital. You have to undo years of just doing the same thing, sort of habits, and just plain inertia. But we're seeing that slowly people, readers, are jumping from one pool, the print pool, into the digital pool. Those who are now reading digital like digital a lot. They're digital magazines, 85%. And the reason why? All the stuff you would expect. It's all the videos and the extra photos and flash and all the cool stuff that you can't practically put on a printed magazine page. Now, if you look at connectivity penetration, again, this is my lame attempt, I suppose, at trying to compare Canada and Peru. And you can see here that in the mobile space, they're exactly the same. Peru is slightly underdeveloped versus Canada, but it's growing, we know that. And Facebook, you know, and really this is just a surrogate for social media in general. That too is growing quite quickly. And so what this chart really says is you've got some very real upside here. As penetration of internet grows, as social media grows, I think you're going to see, you know, a lot more usage of those properties. Now, I threw this slide in just because it surprised me. And I'm hard to surprise when it comes to a lot of magazine things. But tablet reading of magazines, newspapers, and ebooks is the #1 activity being done on tablets. More than checking email, more than browsing and searching for stuff, more than social networking, more than gaming. So clearly, when you look at how tablets are being used, it's almost like print itself. You know, I won't say they're interchangeable, but there are a lot of similarities in how they're used and how they're received. Now, I'm going to play a couple of quick videos. I'm sure you've all seen tablet editions of magazine. Do we have sound? I don't know if you really need sound here. Just follow along. This is probably a more traditional look at what a tablet-type magazine might be. How you can scroll it, how it's interactive.
Other departments include the Masterclass, which is a technique-filled recipe perfect for a weekend of cooking, and Weeknight Supper, which is a quick 20-minute dish. So let's dive into one of these recipes.
I'm going to be making some grilled tuna with an heirloom tomato salsa.
This is our cooking mode. Just tap the screen to pause the video. You can also tap on a written step to go directly to that spot in the video. You can browse our chefs and browse all of the recipes. You can filter your search by ingredient, cuisine, prep time, and more. Once you choose your recipe, you can add it to our easy-to-use shopping list and check off ingredients as you shop. Finally, find entertainment on the go with our Pana TV feature and download the app on your iPhone to take Pana with you in your pocket. Start cooking with Master Chefs now.
So that was a fairly traditional look at a magazine, really. It's just you're putting in video and other things, not just print. This now is a much more high-tech, highly interactive, maybe even very male sort of driven magazine for automobiles. And you get some sense here as to, again, some of the things you can do using animation, for example. So there you have it. So really, I think two very different approaches to how you can bring a magazine content to life. Same kind of content, just presented in a very different way that makes the most use of the medium in which it sits. Let's just briefly talk now about media consumption. Print magazine reading by age, again, comparing Canada and Peru. You can see in Canada the penetration is about 80%. And it's pretty solid right through every age demographic. Peru, lower for sure, but again, what I see here is that upside for growth. As you launch more magazines, as more advertisers get involved, I think you're going to see that these numbers will rise across all the demographics. Same thing with number of reading occasions per month. Canada not quite twice that of Peru, but again, upside there as to more and more choices I believe will begin to move those numbers up as well. And even media consumption by time of day, I think, is very, very similar in Canada and Peru. You can track this, from 6 a.m., you wake up, you might check the email, then you get into news on TV, the newspaper, radio if you're in your car. From there, you're at work, you're likely working on a computer. Then it's lunchtime, the cell phones come back out again, you're checking emails and perhaps social media. And then magazines begin to kick in the evening, as does TV, and then using devices as you're going to bed, reading or whatever before you go to bed. So we're seeing the same thing in Canada as what you're seeing here. If you look at print in Canada and where it's read primarily at home. It's read in a lot of different places, but primarily at home. And even if you look at tablets and smartphones, tablets being the black line, smartphones the gray line, you can see that it's primarily at home too. Yes, both of them are read in lots of other places, especially using smartphones. Tablets, again, more focused towards home than smartphones. But it's very print-like in that respect too, and that they're read in kind of the same ways in the same places. We can even see that, tablets, for example, are being used mostly in the living room, followed by the bedroom and the kitchen. I don't know why the bathroom isn't on there, maybe it should be, but what this is telling us is that areas of relaxation is a very big deal. And the reason for that is that research is telling us that advertising receptivity is greatest during leisure time. And so that's where magazines are very well positioned to deliver advertising at a time when people are, for the most part, stress-free, they are captive, they're more relaxed, and therefore more receptive and they have the time to spend browsing through advertising. Whereas if you're working at home or outside the home, if you're shopping or doing other things or in the car, you're a lot more distracted, maybe more stressed, and you're probably less receptive at that point in time. So back to the reading opportunities at home, your receptivity, I think you're going to find it's very high for magazines. So, just as a headline here, magazines in the future, I hope, if nothing else, what you took away from my talk so far is that magazine brands today are extremely well positioned as multi-channel content providers, providing great content that people want to read, and it's up to the consumer to choose on what platform they want to access that content. So it's their choice. And when it's their choice, then wonderful things happen. Okay, let's talk a little bit about how media works. And I'm going to take you through 10 strengths or key benefits that I believe are key to magazines and why they are so important to advertisers and to consumers alike. I think you always have to start with targeted audience delivery. Magazines do a very good job of delivering demographically. For example, I'll reference Canada. It's the market I know best. There are magazines for kids, young kids, for teens, then for young adults, for parents, for senior citizens, and everything in between. From a geography perspective, we have lots of national magazines, magazines that are targeted to regions, which typically are provinces, and even city magazines that are really focused on what's going on in the city in any given day, week, or month. And then you have passions and needs, and this is back to what I had talked to before, the context, is that you can target by those particular things that are super important to the reader. And that's why they buy the magazines, because they want to know more about fashion or food or whatever it happens to be. But there's another side to targeting too. We just recently did some research in Canada that I'm very proud to say won a gold award, international gold award for best magazine research. And what we found in this was that not all consumers are created equal. We found two very important groups within that demographic pool, the first being called early adopters. And these people like to be the first to try new products. These people consider themselves leaders, and they drive the speed of brand adoption. So if you're launching a new brand, even bringing a seasonal brand back up into the forefront of people, these people tend to be the ones who get out in front. I don't know if you see this phenomenon here, but I know in Canada when a new smartphone gets launched, people line up 2 days beforehand, wait and around the block, outside, waiting for that store to open to get the first one. That's these people. They consider themselves to be leaders. And so when they do something, they tell all their friends they did it, and their friends want to do it too, and so they amplify that behavior. And then you have influencers, the second group. And they like being recognized as an authority, whether they are or they aren't. And they are very good at leveraging word of mouth because they love to talk to the friends and their family about this great brand or this great product, whatever the heck it happens to be. And so they evangelize for that brand on their behalf. So if you look at this chart, what you see is that digital magazines are followed by print magazines, and then other media follow down, social, etc. So early adopters, the black line, category influencers, the gray line. Magazines are very, very good at delivering these kinds of people. These people tend to be brand advocates. They are very brand loyal, typically. They love to use word of mouth and social networking to tell anybody and everybody they know, whether they want to hear it or not, about their product. The second strength is engagement. This is a pretty simple definition, but let me just quickly read it to you. An engaged reader is personally involved. They are thinking, reacting, visualizing, laughing, connecting, and responding. They are finding new facts and gaining knowledge. Reading is an action sport, and you, the reader, are the key player. I think that's a pretty good definition. Now, if you look at engagement in the context of magazines, looking at both advertisements and editorial, you can see that recall scores are really quite high. If you look at net action scores, what that really means is, did they do something after they saw that ad? They too are incredibly high, and they're very similar. So what this suggests to me is that people are reading the advertising almost as much as the editorial itself. And that's pretty astonishing when you think about it. Now, here I want to talk about how magazines capture and hold attention. And I'm going to compare print magazines, general websites, and TV on these 4 dimensions here along the bottom. So if you take a look at feeling engaged, magazines, general websites, and then TV, you can see there's not really a lot to pull them apart on that dimension. Has my full attention? Magazines, print magazines, suddenly begin to rise up. Ads are relevant, and ads are a good part of the experience. And frankly, these two absolutely should be delivering high numbers because, back to the context, if I'm buying a fishing magazine, I want to see ads about fishing. And advertisers are smart. They're going to be the people in those magazines. And so the ads should be relevant because the ads typically follow the editorial. Now we can see the same thing here with digital magazines, so digital versions of them. Here we're comparing digital magazines to online video to social media across the same dimensions here at the bottom. Here you can see that social media actually has a slight lead. I don't know if that's significant or not. But then when you get to full attention, that's kind of interesting. Social media begins to drop away. Ads are relevant. Again, this is where digital magazines really show their ability versus online video and social media. And the same thing is the ads are a good part of the experience. So people aren't running away from the ads, like whether it's print or digital. They actually see it as a service, as something good. Focused attention. This is where I get to talk about brain science. Aren't you all excited about that? I know you have to be. When people read a magazine, their brain has to work about 5 times harder at processing the printed word than it does in absorbing a TV message. And so this fully engaged, high-level processing of the printed word is very good at seeding things back into the memory so that when you're standing in front of that shelf saying, gee, what should I buy? That's when you hope that your brain actually kicks into gear and says, oh, I saw that ad, maybe I should give that a shot. So that whole idea of reading is very important. I mean, you all read in this room. You know what it takes to read. Both eyes have got to be 100% focused on the page. Otherwise, you're not using that medium. You're not reading. And so this fully engaged reading process allows your audience to quickly absorb, almost like a sponge, detailed messages at their own pace, which helps to increase the understanding of brand benefits. Now, the nice thing about magazines is you can spend as much time with the magazine as you want. And so that increases your ability to actually communicate to your consumer. Our fourth benefit, advertising receptivity. Advertisers want to know, is anybody paying attention to this stuff? You know? Well, if we can compare here, print magazines are very good. So are digital magazines versus the same counterparts that we were comparing to before in terms of relevance of advertising. How about a source to learn about new products and services? Here, websites and magazines, print magazines, are exactly equal, and this makes total sense to me. You go and research stuff online, often you get ideas out of print that takes you online, so the two work together, right? And then reading a digital magazine also delivers very well. I like this study a lot, maybe for the obvious reasons, but this is from Adobe, you know, the software people who we all love to hate often. When they asked professional marketers and consumers the same question, where do you prefer to look at an ad? What they found was that their favorite print magazines was their preferred medium to see ads. Trust. Again, magazines do very well, both print and digital. Here, TV doesn't do very well, and neither does online video. And if you want to really go crazy and look at the full suite of all the different touch points that people have to media, whether it's paid or endorsement, you look at past experience, the very first gray bar up there. If you've used a product for a while, chances are you trust it because you keep buying it, right? Otherwise, you wouldn't buy it if you didn't trust it. And then you have recommendations, online reviews, editorial in magazines and newspapers, information that you might get in store, company websites, and then you get into paid media. Ads in print magazines do very well, as you can see there. Same thing in paid digital media. Here, ads on magazine websites, ads on magazine apps. So again, trust is a big part, and I think a lot of that has to do with when people read magazines, very often they feel like they know the editor of that magazine. And that, I think, transforms into this broader sense of feeling of trust and credibility and whatnot, which then halos onto brand advertising. Throw to web and search. This is kind of interesting. People reading print at home use tablets and smartphones to shop a lot. More so than if they're watching TV at home and using those devices. More so than all the other activities that they measured in this study. So magazines are truly a catalyst, print magazines, a catalyst to online shopping activity. These are good numbers. Searched online about the product, visited the advertiser's website. So again, you can see some very big numbers in terms of people who are going online to learn more once they see something in print ad. Social media, our seventh strength. Here are a whole wide variety of social touch points. The black line are magazine readers, and the gray line is really the general population. And when you compare these, you can see that magazine readers tend to be very overdeveloped. Maybe I shouldn't say very. They're overdeveloped in using social media. So, you know, again, that helps them to talk to other people about products. And this is another study that really amplifies that. I love to share articles with products that I see in magazines immediately with others. I like to use social media to talk about what I'm reading in magazines. And it's important to me to be able to engage with a magazine brand on social media platforms. And again, you can see the index on the far right side. They're very big numbers again. So they're very active socially. And then it carries into word of mouth. Again, some more good numbers here, where after seeing an ad, they mention that ad to others, friends, family. And now we're getting into the stuff that really matters to advertisers. Okay, they're seeing it, that's good, but are they really doing something after they see that ad? Well, what we know is that 62% of print magazine readers do something after reading an ad. You can see up here, considered purchasing the advertised product or service at 27%. Had a more favorable opinion about the advertiser. Now, a lot of people say, well, that's a pretty soft metric. Okay, so they felt good about you, all warm and fuzzy. Well, is that worth it? Well, a lot of research today is really showing that if, the more you like an advertiser, the more you're more likely to actually buy from that advertiser. Gathered more information about the product, purchased the product, recommended the product, visited the website, went to a store or a dealer, clipped or saved an ad for future reference, went to their social network. So you can see that people are doing things after they read a print ad. And the same is true with digital magazine readers. They too have 90% do something after seeing an ad, and you can see the types of things that they do here. Went to a website, contacted an advertiser, and on and on. At the end of the day, for all the advertisers in the room, you know it's all about return on investment. You know, did I sell something? And was it a good, efficient sale? This is a great study that was done by Meredith in the United States, which showed that for every dollar spent, they were generating $7.81 in sales. So that's the return on investment in the first 12 months. And of course, that generates further sales. People get loyal to that product past that 12 months. So that means that that investment continues to carry on in future years. This is a second study that also looked at ROI. It showed about a $6.61 return on investment for every dollar spent on a magazine ad. And this particular study showed, across a variety of different products, the lift that those products got when they advertised in magazines. Just the term, it's used a fair amount, I know in Canada. It's the purchase funnel. You know, you get people in through brand awareness. You need to first make people aware of your product, and you drive them down to the point where they're ready to buy something. Well, when you take a look at that, and this is an amalgamation of lots and lots and lots of interviews with people. Brand awareness, you can see that magazines versus online and TV do very good at building awareness. They're also building brand favorability and building brand purchase intent. And I think, to me, the reason why magazines do so well here is for a lot of the reasons that I've already talked about. People trust the content, you know, how they read it, they're more receptive. I mean, all these things, I think, all add up and contribute to why these scores are why they are. This chart, I always find kind of fun just because, and this is still looking at the purchase funnel, but if you look at, here, let me go down here. If you look at this is if you put all your money in TV and you get a result in the marketplace, right? This bar here is if you spent that exact same budget, the same level of money in both print and magazines. And you can see throughout the whole purchase funnel here that you're getting a higher return for the same expenditure. Now, I won't pretend that this only happens when you put magazines in the mix. You know, it's called the multiplier effect, essentially. You know the term two heads are better than one? Well, the same is true with media. Two media are better than one. And it just means you get greater efficiencies, higher reach patterns, all kinds of things. Two media talking to you on the same strategy in different ways, and it all comes together in your brain, and it creates for a higher response. Related to the multiplier effect is this. Certainly in Canada, I will not speak for here, but I suspect it could be similar. The levels might be different. But if you track the development of television and magazines on household income from low here all the way to high over here, you can see that television is very good at reaching lower income households, and that print is not so good, and then vice versa. Magazines very good at reaching higher income households, TV not so good. But the story here, in my view, is this. Because where magazines don't do so well, TV picks it up, and vice versa. Where TV doesn't do very well, magazines pick it up. Now, call me biased, but what side would I rather be on? I'd rather be on that right-hand side. That's where people have got money in their pockets to buy branded, advertised products. And magazines are very good at reaching these people. You'll be pleased to know that is the very last chart you're going to see from me today. Round of applause, I know. Okay, let me just segue now very quickly into the potential of the printed magazine page. I hope you'll find these things kind of interesting. Adidas, double page spread, Every time you open and close the magazine, this lady's doing sit-ups. Very smart use of the medium. You know, it's almost like a product demonstration in some way. This is an ad for dental floss. So these are teeth, and I don't know if you can see it, but there's a strip down the middle which is an actual piece of dental floss. It's like a bookmark. Again, very clever use of the medium. And again, it brings the product to life. It becomes the hero of the ad. Apple, when they launched their ultra-thin computer, double-page spread, to show how thin their computer was. It's thin, it's as thin as a magazine. Again, very brilliant use of the space, how to really demonstrate their product without demonstrating at all, showing that main benefit that they're trying to sell. That's a hair shampoo. Very smart. You know, I think the fact that you just laughed, I mean, says it all. It made you feel a whole lot better about this brand, and it might actually make you go out and buy it, just because these people have a sense of humor. Other things you can do, light-sensitive inks. This was a Brazilian ad. The Brazilians, I don't know what they're doing right now, but they're doing some fabulous, fabulous stuff. I give them full credit. This is from a sunscreen manufacturer, and this is printed with inks. If you look at it without sunshine shining on the page, let's go back. You're going to see a man and a woman, they're both kind of pale looking, but then you put it in the sun, she tans up beautifully because of course she's using the product, and he fries because he didn't put anything on it, right? So again, it's a bit of a product demonstration, in this case using light-sensitive ink. Flavored paper, believe it or not. Sushi flavored paper, wouldn't you just love that? So if you skip lunch, you can just eat your magazine. Dry tattoos. Just peel something off the actual page, put it on, rub it, and you get a temporary tattoo. At least you hope it's temporary. Another Brazilian example, when Toyota launched a very eco-friendly SUV, they wanted to really hit home with this and stand out. And so what they did was they printed their ad on a real banana leaf and then inserted that, bound it into the magazine. Now, who's not going to notice that? Truly intrusive. Paper folds, Coca-Cola, I think this was Brazilian again. They worked with the publisher to strategically put a die cut, a hole, in the magazine and rolled it up. So when you rolled it up, the hole aligned, you slide your cell phone into it, and it acts as an amplifier for when you play your music on your cell phone. Pretty simple stuff, but kind of cool too. And it actually works. This is super cool. This is new, I believe, from Brazil again. Nivea sun products. This is a cell phone or tablet charger. It's a USB port on one side of the ad. There's a solar array panel on the other side of that ad. And so, I mean, perfect. You're using their product, and you can keep your cell phone, whatever, when you're having a day at the beach. Keep it fully charged. Smart stuff. This is fun. It's ridiculously expensive, but it's fun. CBS, the big TV network in the United States, they created this ad. I don't know how well you can see this, but directly above, that is a video screen. Can you see the little square? That's an actual video screen. And these things here, these 5 buttons, each one of them, when you press it, will play a 1-minute video clip of their Monday night lineup for their primetime TV shows. Now, like I said, it's very expensive, but this was built to target people like you so that, you know, it'd be probably limited numbers, hundreds, maybe a few $1,000s. And for them, it made sense because it could really publicize Monday night because they wanted to own Monday night. So strategically, smart stuff. Wired magazine. Now, one of the nice things about magazines, you know, that are sold by subscription is that you have people's names and addresses. And what Wired did, they went to their subscribers and said, would you like to have your picture on the cover of Wired magazine? Why, sure. Send in your picture, and a few months later, here you go. Using this technique called variable printing, your picture will show up on the cover. You will see using Google Earth where you live, and your neighbor will get the exact same content with a different cover with, you know, his or her picture on it. So again, just stuff that you can do, but at the end of the day, you can personalize messages on the cover, inside the magazine, whatever, to people specifically. Hi Gary, have you considered whatever promotional piece you want. Have many of you bought those greeting cards and you open them up, they sing happy birthday or they make noise of some sort? Well, you can do the same thing in magazines using sound chips. You can also put USB web key inserts on an insert in the magazine. Just peel it off, put it in your computer, and that will throw you directly to where that advertiser wants you to go. It could be a video, it could be a website somewhere with whatever content you prefer. QR codes, very much on the rise that we're seeing in Canada, where you snap a picture of a QR code that you just print on as part of the ad, and it will then give you access to a promotion perhaps. You can really take them wherever you want them to go. So you give them more content by just clicking on taking a picture of that ad, using an app to get to it. This is cool. This is called near-field communication, which is the next big wave, I think, in retail and in other applications. But you can get little stickers that have got a chip on them that you put on the page. If you lay your smartphone on that ad with that chip, suddenly your cell phone will light up and you can interactively choose the music you want to listen to. So you can use your magazine as an entertainment system in some way. So there's lots and lots of things that you can do. It's really, whatever's rolling around in here, you can put on the magazine page for the most part. So, how do magazines connect? Well, highly targeted. They reach early adopters and category influencers. They create great content in context. They're focused, active reading. All of these things help to drive engagement metrics. Magazine ads are accepted as an integral and trusted part of the magazine package, driving advertising receptivity, not advertising avoidance. And magazine readers have an action orientation. They do stuff after reading an ad. They go to websites, they search, they do word of mouth, they go to social media sites, they drive purchase intent and advertising favorability. And advertisement and magazine ads are proven business builders in terms of driving ROI. And let's not forget some of these last things we saw, the blank page. It's a real invitation to people to do really bold, creative work that's going to resonate with your consumers. They'll be engaged, they'll be inspired, and it'll motivate them to do the things that you want them to do. So I encourage you all to please go boldly, connect with magazines, your friendly neighborhood magazine salesperson, and talk about magazines. Any questions? I don't know if we have time for questions or not.
Yes.
Yeah? Have I killed you all? No questions?
Ok. ¿Tienen unos papelitos donde pueden formular sus preguntas o de lo contrario también tenemos un micrófono por si tienen alguna pregunta? Ah, por acá hay una.
Julio, ¿me ayudas con un micro?
Gracias, Jaime.
Hola. Bueno, primero felicitar al ponente, excelente exposición, muy buenos datos estadísticos realmente. Y me gustaría saber si se maneja algún dato estadístico en cuanto a la cantidad que se lee en Canadá con respecto a lo que se lee en el Perú, ¿no? Porque, bueno, lamentablemente acá en el Perú como que la lectura no es una de las preferencias de las grandes masas, ¿no? La lectura impresa.
I think the best way to answer that, I don't have more depth of data to show one versus the other, but certainly what we've seen in Canada is that if you give them more product to read, come to it. It's about meeting their needs in different ways. So if you can start, not easy for me to say, maybe hard to do, but the more choice you give them, the more editorial genres that they have to choose from, I think the more that people will get involved. I'd like to think that people will evolve in behind them, but I think they need to be led. Certainly we've seen that in Canada where there were a number of categories where people thought, nobody's ever been successful, and this is a specific case example, men's magazines. Men have always been thought of as being non-magazine readers in Canada. But nobody wanted to try because all the research was saying that no, it wasn't going to work. Well, suddenly people launched men's magazines, and they took off like crazy despite people's concerns. They had very low expectations, which got blown away in a positive way. So, like I say, I think there's probably some need there that's just left untapped. I'd like to think. That's a very simplistic overview or point of view. And I don't know your market well enough to know if that flies as a potential solution for you.
Bueno, solo para complementar, de acuerdo a lo que vimos en una lámina tuya, Gary, y a nuestras cifras, lo que vimos en Canadá es una penetración de las revistas en lectoría de 80%, y lo que registran las últimas cifras de Media Research es de una penetración de 32% en Lima, que es donde se mide lectoría de revistas, ¿no? Sin embargo, es bastante poco todavía el alcance, pero hemos tenido un crecimiento extraordinario en los últimos 4 años. Comenzamos con 22%, ¿no? Se han crecido 10 puntos porcentuales. Y como bien dice Gary, creo que es una cuestión de oferta y de oferta que conecte directamente con las necesidades de los diferentes segmentos de consumidores. ¿Tienen alguna otra pregunta por ahí? Bueno, yo tengo una, Gary. ¿Hay más? Ya, perfecto. Y es que lo que estamos recibiendo es algunos comentarios de anunciantes que dicen que después de anunciar, de colocar sus anuncios, ya no reciben tantas llamadas como antes. ¿Qué crees que podría estar pasando?
That's a very good question. Magazines, let me stand up. This makes a bigger target for the throat exactly. You don't like my answer. Magazines are quite different from other media, or pretty general quite different. But I think newspapers are typically read on the day, right? TV ads, radio ads, they come and go, 15 or 30 seconds out. Magazines are read over a space of days. Did you hear any of that? All right, rewind. Magazines are very different in how they're read. If you think about newspapers, they're typically read on one day. TV and radio ads, they come in 15 and 30 second sound bites. They come and they get consumed instantly, they're gone. Magazines are read not in one sitting, not in one day, they're read over a period of time. And so, people pick up a magazine and they'll scan through it to see what they want, then they'll read it, and then it's time to either do something else or go to sleep or whatever. And then they'll come back to it either later that day or the next day or the day after or maybe a week later. And as well, if you have a monthly magazine and they're being sold at a kiosk, a newsstand, they don't all get bought and read on that first day that ad is made available. So, I might be buying that magazine 3-4 weeks after it was actually made available on the kiosk. And so, it's not just wham, boom, you get a response. I should have brought research with me that showed that once you see that ad, the reaction or the response time to react and do something for both magazines and TV is exactly the same. But there is a lag time for readership to build. It's a curve. It starts very low and then it curls up and then it fades at 100% readership. But that takes time to get to that 100% readership. And the last thing I'll say, just to completely confuse you further, magazines are very famous for pass-along readership, right? I read it, I love it, I'm done with it, I want to give it to my brother, my sister, my mother, my father, my friend, whoever it is, and then they read it. And then they pass it to somebody next. In Canada, we have pass-along readership of about 5 people. Sorry, original plus an additional 4, where it moves hands all over the place. And so that then takes a few months for those ads to register with these people at the end of that reading cycle before it actually gets thrown in the garbage and it's covered in coffee stains and it's done, right? So it just takes that time. So if you're looking for the phone to ring today, yeah, it's going to ring today, but it's also going to keep ringing for the next 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, as people catch up and respond to that ad. I think that's the best and probably the longest answer I could give.
Ok, gracias. Acá tenemos una pregunta acerca de cómo calcular, o la mejor forma de calcular el ROI en digital marketing. No sé si...
If I understand the question, I think so much of it comes down to consumer preference. I know, well, I'll use my wife as an example. She hates it when I talk about her things like this. But she was a diehard print fan, I mean a print magazine junkie forever, way before I even met her. But the point I'm trying to make here is that, you know, for her, prying a magazine out of her hand was like, out of my cold, dead hands you are. You know, she would hold on to that thing until she wrung every word out of it. Now that she's traveling a lot, I find that she takes her iPad with her and reads digitally when she goes on vacation, goes on business, rather than lugging a trunk load of magazines with her. And so that's one rule. And others, people just simply prefer to read them digital versus print. And I think we're going to see more of that over time. So what's the role of digital media? Certainly it extends reading to a whole new segment of the population who really never thought about reading magazines in print. In fact, there's research that shows that when people start reading a digital magazine, they actually start buying more print in general. More magazines from print, more books, more newspapers, because suddenly they get, oh geez, this is kind of good. And then they figure out for themselves how they want to read it. So I don't know if that really answers your question well, but I hope it's a start. And I'd be happy to chat more about it later if that's helpful.
Ok, las últimas dos preguntas. Aquí hay alguien que desea saber acerca de las revistas, el consumo de revistas en los jóvenes, ¿no? En relación a la penetración de Internet en Canadá.
Penetration of magazines amongst youth. And are we talking print or digital or both?
Both.
Both? Okay. What we see, and this is kind of interesting, is that when you talk to students, when you survey university students, even high school students, they are amongst the highest magazine readers in the country. When you blend it, you know, the stat I showed you before, where I think you saw 18 to 25 perhaps, was sitting at 80%. If you look at 12 to 25-year-olds, you actually get about an 83 or 84% penetration. I didn't bother showing those kids because I'm not sure there are kids' magazines here. But they are really hungry for them, and parents love to put magazines in front of their kids because it gets them in good habits of reading, rather than watching a screen. Now, I don't know if you're seeing it here, but in Canada there's a lot of talk about how do we get kids more active, how do we get them away from the TV screen, how do we get them away from playing games and playing on their tablets and things. So what they want to do is try and get them reading more. And it could be still on a screen, but it's not watching movies or videos. So it's that trying to build the kid's brain by teaching them to really read and appreciate print. Does that help? I hope.
Y la última pregunta, que, bueno, un poco dirigida a mí, pero también podemos incluir a Gary aprovechando su conocimiento del tema, es ¿cómo están las revistas digitales en Perú? Y bueno, todavía las revistas digitales en Perú están en casi nada, podríamos decir, porque la lectoría de revistas digitales es muy baja, inclusive en un segmento que podríamos llamar el más moderno e innovador, que es el de los ejecutivos. Sin embargo, aprovechando la pregunta, yo quisiera preguntarle a Ari, ¿cómo se puede plantear un mix entre revistas digitales y revistas impresas, ¿no? Para una estrategia de publicitaria?
Well, I think at the start, you're reaching a different segment of your audience. So you're likely going to expand your reach. And it just simply gives somebody that extra choice to get involved in magazine reading if they didn't prefer to do it in print. So I think that's a start. I don't know, how low magazine penetration is here digitally, but certainly one of the things that we see in Canada, and let's recognize here that digital is still in its infancy. It's just a little tiny baby, and it gets cranky, and it cries, and it yells, and it makes a mess, and all these things, but it's getting better and better as it matures. And what we've learned relatively recently is that if you have just a static digital magazine edition, that is received very differently than a fully interactive digital edition, like some of the things I showed you earlier in those videos. So I don't quite know at what stage and what percentage Peru is in this, but people, at the end of the day, I think people really appreciate you making the most of the medium in which that content is being served. And so if you can fully utilize all the tools that digital can provide, like the animation and your ability to play videos and search chefs and then go and use their step-by-step recipes in a very easy way, I mean, that's pretty compelling stuff. And so I think that adds a whole extra dimension in terms of what you can sell people in terms of just the fabulousness of the content. That's a bit of a ramble, but I hope I got somewhere near the answer to that question.
Of course. Gracias.
Yeah.
Bueno, continuando, tenemos a Fernando García, director online de Llorente y Cuenca. Él nos va a explicar el tema News Brands y marketing de contenido, cómo funciona, sus características y los medios idóneos a utilizar.